Good morning and welcome back to Pondering in the Pines. So it's spring here in Colorado and we have all these lovely light blue, purple grape hyacinth coming up in our front yard, which struck me as an awesome opportunity to get started on the spring foraging. So these are pretty tasty, and you do want to make sure you're not confusing them with standard hyacinth, which does have some mildly toxic properties, give you a little bit of gastrointestinal upset. But the grape hyacinth is super tasty. You can eat it in salads, you can add it to floral pasta, but today we're going to be harvesting it to make simple syrup and hyacinth lemonade. So when you're harvesting these, you really just want to take the flowers, because there are some saponins in the leaves and stems which are a little bit bitter, although when cooked you lose that bitter flavor and the delightfully floral flavor comes out instead. So we're just going to try and take our flower petals off. Until we have about a cup for this recipe. And as much as I would love to just go wild with this, we're going to try and leave at least some for Mother Nature too, for our spring bees, early pollinators. And this little section of my yard started off with just about a half a dozen grape hyacinth bulbs, which have spread magnificently over the years. Now they're covering almost about half of this whole area. It's delightful to watch them expand their territory and gives me one of my favorite little springtime foraging delights. Now, harvesting with the intent for simple syrup does give us a wide variety of applications, and like I said, you can eat these flower petals in a salad. It makes a good garnish that is delightfully edible. You can also add them to floral pastas, and the bulbs are also going to be edible, so kind of a garlicky flavor to the bulbs. Definitely something you'd want to cook to get rid of some of the saponins. Those have a tendency to break down under heat in this case, and gives you a little bit less of that bitter flavor, more of a spring garlic or onion flavor. But for simple syrup, traditionally simple syrup is a super saturated solution. It would traditionally be 1 part sugar to 1 part water. In this case, it's going to be 1 part sugar, 1 part water, and 1 part grape hyacinth. Now, don't be worried if you end up with more than a cup full of grape hyacinth. A little extra never hurt anybody. But you do want to have, it's better to have more than not enough for recipes like this, because not only are we trying to get that essence of flavor, we're also trying to capture this glorious blue-purple color that the grape hyacinth has naturally, and we want that to really pop in our simple syrup recipe as well. So when I'm doing spring foraging, I can't help but think about some of the herbal remedies that often are associated with many of these early spring plants, and just plants in general. But this one has a reputation of being a mild nervine, so something that's going to relax the central nervous system, very mild sedative effect from the fresh flowers. And in folk medicine, it's also been something that's been described as an aphrodisiac, specifically for men, at the end of a long winter, and get the blood pumping again. Now, as a nervine, it is a mild sedative and just kind of a gentle, relaxing effect, similar to settling back at the end of the day and taking that deep breath after the hard day's work is done and feeling your body just let go a little bit. Also makes a very fun summery treat. All right, so we've got about a cup or maybe a little bit more. So let's go start the next part of our recipe. All right, we've moved into the kitchen. We're gonna take our grape hyacinth, and again, do make sure that there's not really any stems left in there. So you do want to get those stems out to prevent any bitter flavor from appearing in your simple syrup recipe. So we'll just get any flowers that we can off of those last little stem bits, and those can get set aside for other uses in a little bit, or maybe with my lunchtime salad. And once you're satisfied that you've got almost all the stems or most of the stems out, I'm going to go ahead and add that to our cup. Kind of measure it out a little bit. So right about a cup of grape hyacinth. Now again, when we're talking about simple syrup, the traditional recipe for simple syrup is going to be 1 part sugar to 1 part water. I prefer raw unprocessed sugar. You can definitely use table sugar, that white sugar that you're used to from the grocery store. Brown sugar does work as well, but it does provide its own flavor to the profile of the recipe. And for something as delicate as the grape hyacinth in flavor, we really want to make sure that that flavor is what's shining through, not the flavor of our sugar. Now, you can also use honey for this recipe and for many simple syrups, which might lend something to the flavor profile. But if you're a purist, sticking with very simple white sugar is going to be the best way to get the flavor of these grape hyacinth to really shine through. All right, so we've got our cup of sugar. And we're going to add to that a cup of water. And that's just going to go on a low heat. So we don't want that sugar to caramelize on the stove while we're mixing. We're just going to stir the sugar in. The goal being to get that sugar fully dissolved into the water until the water can't take any more sugar in its structure. So again, a super saturated solution. And if there's a few little grains of sugar left over floating around on the bottom, that's okay. But we just want to get most of that as incorporated as possible. Now, once our sugar is incorporated into the water, I'm going to bump the heat up just a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and add our Grape Hyacinth into the mixture. Now, you're going to want to bring this to a boil for just about a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes, to make sure that the flour structure starts to break down. We get that color and flavor. And then you can go ahead and simmer this for about 5 to 7 minutes at a low heat after it's brought to that initial boil. Now give it the occasional stir just to make sure your flower petals aren't getting stuck on the sides of the pot. And now that we've reached that initial boil, we're going to reduce heat here in just a couple minutes to a simmer. And then we'll be back in a minute for the next part of this recipe. Alright, our simmer's almost done. And you'll be able to tell you're getting close to completion on your simmer because the petals are going to start to look smushy, and instead of having that light blue, they're going to turn a darker color, almost black. But your liquid is also going to start to take on kind of a purpley color as it incorporates the flavor and the color of the petals into the simple syrup. Now, the more petals you have, definitely the stronger the flavor will be, as well as darker coloration for your simple syrup. But you don't need to go overboard with the amount of petals for any batch of simple syrup. There are lots of other delightfully tasty applications you can use these petals for as well. Alright, so our simmer is finished. Go ahead and take that off the heat. And then you're left with something that definitely needs to be strained out so you don't have a whole lot of petals swimming around in your simple syrup. Now, these petals that are left over, you can also use. Now, they've been thoroughly boiled in sugar, and they end up making a sweet little candied treat. So don't throw your petals away. If you're like me, these will go onto the dehydrator, and then once they're crystallized and fully dehydrated, it makes a great little candied flower snack. We're going to set that to the side for later. And what you're left with is this almost purple-black simple syrup. So we're going to go ahead and put that in our jar. Now this, if you're not going to use it fast, you can also definitely sterilize your jars and can this for pretty prolonged shelf life, basically indefinite. Although, if you're like me, this will actually be gone probably in less than a week and a half. But do make sure your jars are clean and sterile just before you put any fluid into them or any food products into them. You definitely want to make sure that you're not introducing any fungus or bacteria into this beautiful, beautiful syrup. So that's going to be our Grape Hyacinth simple syrup.